Surviving Flight 1549, a commercial aircraft, a U.S. Airways flight from New York to Charlotte, lands in the Hudson River in New York City. And amazingly, all the passengers got out alive. Tonight, what went wrong and what went right? We'll hear from the survivors themselves. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
A special good evening to our viewers out west tonight after an eventful day here out east. It had just taken off from New York's LaGuardia Airport bound for Charlotte, North Carolina, and then a mid-air disaster struck U.S. Airways Flight 1549. It's possible that birds flew into both of the aircraft engines. The pilot quickly realized he could not return to the airport and land, his options severely limited. The only place he could go down was the Hudson River just off Midtown Manhattan. There it is. Word arrived over the citywide fire frequency that a commercial jetliner was in the water with 155 people on board. Then over the next few minutes, the doors opened, life vests were inflated, and women and children first, everybody got off that plane. Tonight, the water-filled fuselage is tied up really in the shadow of Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, while this city absorbs the shock of what could so easily have ended in catastrophe. We have all aspects of this extraordinary water landing covered tonight, beginning with our own Mike Taibbi among the first reporters to respond. Mike, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. The onboard count, 150 passengers, 3 flight attendants, and 2 pilots, one of whom, the senior pilot, drew on all of his experience and skill, which combined with near miraculous good luck had a result that was frankly astounding. There were some non-critical injuries, but everyone survived. The first pictures of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 revealed a plane fully intact, with passengers amazingly standing on the plane's wing just over the surface of New York's icy Hudson River. Dozens of commuter ferries and tugboats became first responders, moving quickly, some passengers said instantly, to rescue people from the plane even before the Coast Guard and firefighters arrived on the scene. Good Samaritan rescuers were seen throwing life preservers to passengers who were forced to evacuate the plane just minutes into their flight.
I was sitting in 22A, so the left engine just blew. Fire flames coming out of it, and I was looking right at it because I was sitting right there, and it just started smelling a lot like gasoline. And a couple minutes after that, the pilot said, "You guys got to brace for a hard impact."
The Airbus A320 took off from New York's LaGuardia Airport at 3:26 Eastern Time en route to Charlotte's Douglas Airport, when officials say the plane may have hit a flock of geese, disabling both engines and forcing the pilot to make an emergency landing in the Hudson River on Manhattan's west side. Witnesses on the ground said they saw the plane flying under control, but much too low.
I looked up and saw a plane flying really, really low, and I thought, well, it shouldn't be flying that low. And I saw it try to pull up just a little bit, and then the next thing I know, I just saw water flying everywhere.
The lucky passengers were brought ashore on small boats with smiles on their faces and survival stories that sounded surreal.
I just kept saying, relax, relax, women and children first, and then it just started filling with water.
Passengers were rushed to local hospitals by ambulance, most of those passengers with life vests still on and shaking from the bitter cold. A grateful New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg reacted to the day's extraordinary events.
The first and most important thing is this pilot did a wonderful job, and it would appear that all roughly 155, including crew and 1 infant, got out safely.
The pilot's name, it'll become folklore tomorrow, Chesley Sully Sullenberger. The aircraft floated down the Hudson on the current for a couple of hours before it was secured down in Battery Park near Ground Zero, the southern tip of Manhattan. A team from the National Transportation Safety Board is en route to begin its investigation, not of a tragedy, but of a spectacular accident. Brian?
All right, Mike Taibbi, who remains on the scene for us tonight. Mike, thanks. During our live coverage this afternoon, we spoke by phone with a survivor, a young man you just saw, Jeff Kaloje, who had just made it to shore, and his emotion at having survived was plainly evident. Jeff, and I'm told you were on board this plane.
myself and 5 others that we were traveling down with to go to Myrtle Beach for our annual golf trip. We actually had a flight on Spirit Airlines. Unfortunately, that got canceled, so we got bumped to this flight. And it was nuts, man. We took off, and the engine blew about 3 minutes into the flight, the left engine where I was sitting. And fire just started blowing out that left engine pretty hard. And we thought, well, I've flown out of LaGuardia a lot, so I'm kind of familiar with the runway, but I thought we were going to be able to circle around. But then the captain just said, just brace for impact. And we looked out the window. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to talk about it?
No, I was just going to ask you, Jeff, if these reports that you guys hit a bird or a Canada goose could be accurate. Do you remember any kind of a strike or impact?
I remember this boom, and then we probably dropped about 100 feet. If that was a goose that took down a plane, man, that's nuts. But I don't know. It was really scary, and I'm just really, really thankful that the vast majority of people, if not everyone, is all right. And it's just really it's pretty amazing. And to be honest, although never want to be in a crash like this, I think that the captain did just a hell of a job of making sure that everyone survived, because without good flying, man, it was scary. So I apologize, my voice is cracking a little bit. I'm just really excited to be alive.
No, it's okay, and we're just so happy to hear you alive. Now, I don't want to keep you all afternoon, but I got a few questions. So how did you get off? Are you soaking wet? Were you dry?
Yeah, I'm wet from probably my waist down. It's a little cold out here in New York right now, so it's starting to turn to ice, but I guess the back, I'm not sure if they were open, but the plane just filled with water really quick, really quick. And all the guys on the plane did a great job in making sure that, women and children got off first. And we just made sure of that, and we all hopped into a couple life rafts that started to sink. But I guess it was in New York. I don't know. It was the ferries. It was like 4 or 5 ferry boats that came over and started throwing off life jackets when we were going down. And the response is great. So kudos to the pilot, and kudos to the people that helped get us on board, because I don't know how long we were in that water. It's pretty cold.
And one more question. So you get the brace command from the pilot. You make a controlled landing in the water. You realize what's happening.
If you can call it that.
And how long after you came to a rest did they pop the doors and get the first women and children off?
Honestly, Brian, it seemed like it was instantaneously. It might have been a couple minutes, because we were all just kind of wondering what was really going on, because you just never prepare for something like this. And I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to kind of gargled, but I'm just scatterbrained right now, and just happy to be standing here, I guess, with all these people looking to ask questions, So, hey, God bless, man. I'm just happy that everyone on that plane lived.
He's a very happy, very fortunate man. Our conversation earlier today, moments after he got to safety, really, with survivor Jeff Kaloje of Norwalk, Connecticut. Tom Costello was part of our coverage all day. He covers aviation for us, of course. He's in our Washington bureau tonight with more on what we know about this today. Tom?
In fact, Brian, the pilot is Chesley Sullenberger. Sully is his nickname, a pilot since 1980 with 19,000 hours of experience and a former F-4 pilot. The NTSB GO team already on the scene. They have a pretty good feeling for what happened. A bird strike. A goose strike is the equivalent, we are told, of taking a 1,000-pound weight and dropping it from a height of 10 feet. The A320 is a workhorse for airlines around the world, many of them flying with engines that are manufactured through a 50-50 joint venture, including GE, the parent company of NBC Universal. It can carry up to 160 people. So how could a bird strike or a flock of birds bring down a plane that big? Former NTSB investigator Greg Fife.
Birds can definitely bring down an airplane. One of the things that pilots are concerned with is the ingestion of a bird creates damage. That is, it'll tear up the fan blades, and when those blades now become loose, they get ingested into the rest of the engine, and the engine itself then starts to disintegrate, and that happens in a very quick time period.
This Pratt & Whitney video shows the damage a bird can do to an engine. And bird strikes have been a problem since the days of Orville Wright. In 2007, there were more than 7,600 bird and wildlife strikes on civil aircraft in the U.S. Since 1988, more than 219 people have been killed worldwide because of bird strikes. And experts worry that the migration patterns may be making the problem even worse. Once the pilot realized he'd lost both engines, he put the plane down on the water. That was a potentially life-saving move. Since the plane is tightly sealed and pressurized, water would have had a hard time seeping in, at least at first, giving rescuers time to get in position.
One of the things about the Airbus, the A320 Airbus, is that they actually have a button called the ditching button, where the crew will push that button. When they do it, all of the outflow valves, all of the ram air ports, everything that has an airflow through it in the fuselage seals up. So when the airplane then goes into the water, the fuselage is airtight.
Grab ankles, head down, stay low.
Flight attendants practice for water landings and learn to never open the rear door in a water landing, since that can sink a plane.
You may have to survive the elements for a long time before rescue.
The 1549 crew did exactly that, following procedures and only opening the front doors. Had they opened the rear door, the plane could have sunk tail first. Back to the bird issue now. Airports around the country, including here in Washington, use cannons, rockets, flashing lights, falcons, and dogs to scare birds away, but they remain a constant presence. And with signs that their populations may be increasing, they are also a constant threat. Brian?
As long as birds and aviation have to coexist. Tom Costello in our Washington bureau after a long day. Tom, thanks. The day's other news when our broadcast continues here on this Thursday evening, including tonight's nationally televised farewell address from President Bush. Also tonight, the giant steps taken today for President-elect Obama's plans to try to turn the U.S. economy around. And later, moving closer to a ceasefire in Gaza, but in the meantime, the fighting intensifies further. At the White House tonight, continuing a tradition among presidents of the modern era, President Bush said his formal farewell. He spoke in the East Room, live audience of assembled staff, friends, and family, and started by evoking the defining crisis of his presidency, the attacks of 9/11.
As the years passed, most Americans were able to return to life much as it had been before 9/11. But I never did. Every morning, I received a briefing on the threats to our nation. I vowed to do everything in my power to keep us safe. Like all who have held this office before me, I have experienced setbacks. And there are things I would do differently if given the chance. Yet I've always acted with the best interests of our country in mind. I have followed my conscience and done what I thought was right. You may not agree with some of the tough decisions I have made, but I hope you can agree that I was willing to make the tough decisions.
President Bush saying farewell to the nation and his guests at the White House tonight. In the meantime, as Mr. Bush prepares to depart the scene, the bad news on the economy just keeps on coming. But President-elect Obama got a big boost from Congress today on two fronts as he tries to turn things around with some massive government spending. Our chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd is with us tonight from there. Chuck, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Well, he's not yet in office, and yet Barack Obama passed his first big political test in Congress. Down to the wire, Congress barely came through on another $350 billion for the troubled financial industry. It came down to a handful of votes. The money for the troubled banks comes just as there are fresh signs of a bad economy getting worse. On the jobs front, latest numbers show over 500,000 people filed for unemployment in the first full week this year. That's a 10% jump from the week before. And on the housing front, foreclosure filings set an all-time record in 2008, surpassing 3 million. The double economic gut punch came as California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger today portrayed a bleak state of affairs for the nation's largest state economy.
The $42 billion deficit is a rock upon our chest that we cannot breathe until we get it off.
As Barack Obama breathed a mini sigh of relief, passing his first major political test by arm-twisting senators to deliver on the financial bailout, The House unveiled Obama's economic stimulus plan.
Oh, my God.
And Republicans signaled the president-elect could be in for a rocky road.
We've got an uphill climb if we're going to bring this economic recovery package to something that looks sane to the American people.
The $825 billion package already has Democrats on the defensive.
We wanted to get the biggest bang for the buck of every dollar spent without having the package be so big that it weighed down.
Nearly 2 million jobs have been lost.
In Ohio, interest groups are launching a campaign-style push to sell Obama's plan. The president-elect travels to the one-time battleground state tomorrow. Well, today was about stimulus and financial bailouts. In an interview with the Washington Post, Barack Obama said next month he's going to start tackling entitlement reform. What does that mean? In other words, Obama's going to touch the third rail of American politics, Social Security.
All right, Chuck Todd on a cold night on the North Lawn at the White House. Chuck, thanks. And there's late word tonight. The Bank of America is near a deal with the Treasury Department to get $15 to $20 billion of government money to keep itself afloat. The Bank of America, the nation's largest bank in terms of assets, has already received $25 billion of bailout money, but says it needs more to cover the losses it incurred when it acquired Merrill Lynch late last year. We're back in a moment with the latest on tonight's emergency landing and amazing rescue here in New York. When we come back, what could be a game-changing day of violence in the Middle East. News from overseas tonight from Gaza. Some of the fiercest fighting since the Israeli offensive against Palestinian militants there started 20 days ago now. Today, one Israeli air raid killed the Hamas security chief. Another struck the UN headquarters in Gaza, and efforts to end the fighting gain momentum. Our own Martin Fletcher today became one of the first journalists to get into Gaza since the fighting started. He is now tonight safely back in Tel Aviv with the latest. And Martin, good evening.
Brian, tonight Hamas is closer to a ceasefire, but with conditions. They say Israeli troops must pull out of Gaza within a week, and they say reopen borders immediately. But for the time being, if anything, the fighting's getting fiercer. There's nowhere to hide in Gaza City. Israeli troops are blasting closer to the center, sending Palestinians fleeing for their lives. They're calling it the toughest fighting in Gaza so far. Israel's defense minister said today they'll fight till the last moment. Israel shelled the Al-Quds hospital, rocketed an office block housing Reuters television. We spoke by phone with an ambulance volunteer from Australia.
It's a frightening scene. There is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of fear.
In both cases, Israel said they were fired on from the buildings first. And today, I was aboard an armored personnel carrier as the Israeli army took reporters into Gaza. We found a whole region cleared of Palestinians and now a staging area for Israeli soldiers. The aim, Israel wanted to explain why it's hitting Gaza so hard.
We have an enemy that doesn't know any law.
This is the closest that the Israelis have taken the media into Gaza so far. We're just on the edge of the northernmost Gaza town. We're seeing the Israeli point of view, but we have no idea what's going on inside the town, not even what is causing this plume of smoke above the city. We found out later the UN refugee compound was ablaze, a refuge for 700 Palestinians struck twice by Israeli shells. Tons of food destroyed. 3 people were injured. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in Jerusalem pushing for a ceasefire was outraged. Prime Minister Olmert apologized, explaining that gunmen fired from the UN compound first.
The response was very harsh, and I'm very sorry for the intelligence.
As the fighting continued, Israel's Security Cabinet met in special session tonight. They decided to send Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni to Washington overnight to finalize an agreement with the United States on a joint plan to stop Hamas from rearming. Brian?
Martin Fletcher back from Gaza in Tel Aviv as the sun gets ready to come up on the Middle East for another day. Martin, thanks. We'll take a break. We're right back with the latest on tonight's lead story, the near tragedy, the dramatic rescue in the icy waters off New York City. A commercial airliner lands in the Hudson River, and because those waters are so heavily trafficked, it was immediately surrounded by ferry boats, police and fire boats. Some of the passengers were brought to the other side of the river in New Jersey. Our own Rahema Ellis is at the waterfront in Weehawken, New Jersey tonight. Rahema, how many were brought there, and how's everybody doing?
Everyone is fine, we can report, Brian. It was a dramatic rescue on two shores. As you say, I'm on the Weehawken side, New Jersey side. Several people were able to walk out of the terminal ferry where they were brought to when they were brought off of the water. They walked onto buses that were waiting here along the pier. Some others were brought out on stretchers to ambulances that were waiting. They were smiling, obviously glad to be alive. One man said, "The pilot saved our lives." A woman I talked to who was on a stretcher, I asked her, how was she doing? She gave me only a smile and the thumbs up, which was a good sign. Doctors say that people are suffering from hypothermia, impact injuries, and stress, but the good news is that all of them were rescued from these icy waters here along the Hudson River, and they're in hospital tonight, and they are going to make it home okay. Brian, back to you.
Rahema Ellis on the other side of the Hudson in Weehawken, New Jersey tonight. What a day in this city and those passengers. Very lucky at the end of this day, and that'll do it for our broadcast this Thursday night. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams. We, of course, hope to see you back here tomorrow evening. Good night.